would like to welcome you all to today's Caring for the Mental Health of Children webinar. My name is Reverend Kathy Pittenger. I'm the Children's Initiatives Coordinator for the Michigan Conference, and I'm so glad to be hosting today's webinar. Just a couple of housekeeping reminders. Today's webinar is being recorded. We ask that you keep your microphone on mute until we get to the questions and answers part, and then we can have some conversation if we need to, or if you have questions. Please feel free to type your questions in the chat box anytime during our time together. If it's something that, like, wait, I need to interrupt Lauren, I'm glad to do that. We've already talked about that ahead of time. If it's something that can wait till the end and you just want to type it out so you don't forget, feel free to do that, and we can do that at the end. I'm really excited to introduce our speaker today. Lauren Victor has over 15 years of experience in the mental health field and over a decade as a full-time school social worker. She has a bachelor's and master's degree from the University of Michigan, go Blue, and has experience working with people from a variety of ages and backgrounds. Caring for the mental health of children and their caregivers is always an important topic, but has become even more so during the last almost 9 months with the pandemic. So thank you, Lauren, for being with us today. I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. And of course, since that's been written, it's definitely more than 20 years of experience now. So Kathy, introduced me. Basically, I've been working with young people since I was a young person. It's always been something I've enjoyed, whether it was tutoring or mentoring or, in all kinds of settings. So I've worked for child welfare agencies. I've worked in the school system, the public school system, private school system. And then I've done a lot of work with in the center-based programs, Genesee Intermediate School District. I did a lot of work in the schools with a center-based program for kids who had pretty extreme emotional and behavioral outbursts and had to be removed from the setting, and we worked with them and then reintegrated. And then the last 8 years I was in the public sector was in a middle school in Clarkston, Michigan as the school social worker. And now I'm in the private sector in private practice. So I work with all ages, backgrounds, but a lot of the work that I do is with young people. And so, yeah, I have quite a bit of experience working with all different young people. So today, we do have some really unique challenges happening right now in our world that are unlike anything we've ever seen before. And so I think a lot of us are kind of floating out there, doing the best we can, learning on the fly. But I want to make sure to touch on some points today in terms of how we can really support our young people during this time and always, and also how we can support ourselves. Because not only Zoom fatigue is a very real thing, but life fatigue in general, I feel like is really intense right now. And so there's some things we can do, just little tweaks and big tweaks that maybe would help our young people and also help ourselves just be more present and mindful when we're working with these young people, to work smarter instead of harder. So, what I ask today is really just to keep an open mind. I know that when I was in my younger years as a school social worker and working with young people, sometimes I would get advice that I just kind of disregarded right away. That seems really simple. That's not going to work for me. And then I would find myself in situations where it was kids swinging from the rafters and I wasn't sure what else to do. And I'd try something and I would be surprised that it would work. Or I'd tweak something a little bit to make it work for that particular situation. So that's really what I ask of you, is just to keep an open mind. Not everything is going to make sense for your particular situation. And I respect that most of you as caretakers are the experts on your young people that you're working with. So if something I say doesn't work for you, disregard it. I won't know because we're on Zoom, so it won't hurt my feelings. But hopefully you'll find some things that can make your life a little bit easier. So the main focus today is going to be on supporting young people and their caregivers in today's world. We have the pandemic, we had the election, and still have the ongoing stuff with that. We have all of this social media. We have schools, virtual schools from home. So parents now went from full-time parenting to overtime, right? And caretakers, the same thing. And so it's really crucial to kind of adapt to whatever we're seeing in today's world and make it work with what we know about child development, healthy emotional development. And the things we do today when young people are young, set them up for a lifetime of health and fulfillment, or sometimes dysfunction. I do believe that most caretakers are doing the absolute best that they can. And that, you know, I don't think anyone really sets out to make a big mistake. But instead of being out there just floating around, hopefully today I can kind of ground some things for you and encapsulate them so they're you have a little more of a roadmap and you're not just trying to find your way. So there's so many different resources on child development and all of these concepts and the different milestones. But for the sake of today, in a very small, to me, time frame, I'm kind of boiling them down into some really key points that I've learned over the years with research and real life experience. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is attachment. If attachment, as we, historically we've thought about it in terms of mom and baby, but we know way better. We know so much more now that a child is raised by an entire community. We're not an island. And so that could be primary caretaker, could be grandparent, could be sibling, could be the mom, the dad. It could be a variety of people. And so that attachment, we know, and it's been so well researched how critical that is with the primary caretaker. And so what that does is it sets a child up for the ability to initiate and maintain and cultivate real connections in relationships throughout their life. That first attachment, or that primary caregiver attachment, gives them a feeling of safety and security. It starts building that trust, that emotional reciprocity. And when we meet young people who haven't had that, it creates a lot of problems. We see people who, instead of they are unable to really connect on a deep human level with others and really have those meaningful relationships. They struggle a lot in their relationships, and we see manipulation, and we see narcissism, and we see isolation, people who are just not comfortable connecting. And connecting is really the core of the human experience, right? So if we think about the biggest punishments, the most severe punishments in the correctional system, in the schools, it's isolation, right? It's solitary confinement. It's removing those people from the human experience. And so if we look at punishment in that way, we want to really avoid that isolation experience. It's harmful, especially for a young person. They don't really know how to cope and soothe and figure out what's happening when they're by themselves. The way that we connect with young people, that attachment, is crucial. I cannot stress this enough, because we're so busy with phones and with screens and with cooking and cleaning and, oh my gosh, and working and so many things. It is so important to really connect, to put those things away and connect in a real and direct way with young people. It's super meaningful to them, and it communicates that you are important to me and you are valid, and you are safe. Okay. So rather than, when they walk into a room, whatever age they are, I mean, walking, so probably not 5 months, because that would be really interesting. But they're walking into a room and we're on our phones. Put the phones down, turn the TV down, or turn it off. Ask them, make that eye contact. The eye contact is huge. Get down on their level. How is your day? How are you feeling? Just saying good morning. Okay. It's so tempting to multitask. And what we've found is that you really can't multitask and effectively connect with young people. They just, if you're not, I mean, that's why in the classroom we say all eyes on us, right? Because when they're not looking and we don't know what they're paying attention to, they're distracted. Okay, so that is, and you want to encourage them to connect too. So you have a teenager, let's say, or younger and younger kids are getting these electronics and things, and they're in virtual school and screen. You want to encourage them to put that stuff down too and connect with you and say, hold on a second, I'm busy, I'm playing my game, or I'm in the middle of something. Okay, I can wait. Why don't you save your game? I want to sit and talk to you for a minute. I want to connect with you. That is so important. And I feel like we're just so busy today that it's even more important for young people to really learn that connection, especially they're not in school. A lot of people right now around the country are not in school in person. And so they're really like craving that connection. It's so important. The second area is, this one's really inconvenient sometimes, but it's really, really important. Creating a safe space for emotional expression. Emotions can be really inconvenient, especially what I call the undesirable ones. But all of the emotions are really important. They're crucial for human development, for just that human experience. We're not raising robots, right? That's not realistic, and we don't want that, I hope. If you want that, I can't help you. But, we want to create a safe space for all of those emotions. And it is, like I said, it can be really inconvenient because they're not time sensitive. They're not encapsulated. They can be big and they can be messy and they can be loud and, come at times where we're busy doing things and we might not have the time and the space and the capacity to really stop everything and work on those things. But for young children, emotions are so big. And, as adults, we have big emotions too, but we also have way more perspective as to what is a crisis and what is okay, and I can handle this, what's scary and what is like manageable. For young children, we see they really aren't able to kind of triage that yet. And so to them, every emotion is a big emotion and every emotion is real. And so as the adults, we want to create a safe space for them to feel those things. That's very real and it's really important. So we want the fear, the anxiety, the embarrassment, the rejection, those hurts and those negative emotions, we want to create a space for them, even when they're inconvenient. So what we want to do is, it's something that I call holding the space. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard that before. But rather than taking it over and saying, you're okay, stop crying, you'll be fine, it's no big deal, go to your room and kind of figure this out, calm down. I mean, think about it. As adults, when is that helpful? When we are really feeling something strong and someone says, hey, that's no big deal, stop it. As a child, I think my mom is actually on here, and God bless her. Let me tell you that right now. I was not an easy kid at all. I was too much in every way, like really. And I think that's why I've gravitated towards those really strong-willed young people. But it was, she can probably tell you, like, everything that I felt was times 10. And as a young person, she had 3 young children. She was working full time, doing the super mom thing. And so I know that my emotions were really inconvenient sometimes. But when I think back to these situations where I had some strong emotions and they were inconvenient, what I was met with was, stop. You're too much. Stop being dramatic. This is no big deal. Stop crying. Do you want me, do you need to go home? Those kinds of things. And so what it did was it created a sense of shame for me that we've totally worked through. I love you, Mom. We've totally worked through it and we've come to the other side of it and it's okay. But at the moment, in that childhood space, that was really, it was a huge rejection for me. And I think, and I've seen it with young people when I've worked with them, that when they're having this emotional reaction and this feeling, we really need to encourage that and embrace it. And like I said, that can be really messy. So it is going to look different for all of you, depending on what you're doing in those moments, right? Because you can't always stop everything. But what happens when we stifle young people's emotions are 2 things. What happens is they either go inside, and that's where we see the depression piece and the anxiety piece, is that they have that shameful experience of, my feelings aren't valid and feelings aren't safe. And so what that does is we know now that we can't really repress feelings and have them go away. What happens is they bubble up always, and we cope with them in really inconvenient ways. Rather than expressing them, moving through them, and going past them, we end up getting stuck with these big feelings. And so that's when we see later in life, we see addiction, we see people obsessed with being too busy. I think we see that a lot nowadays. We see people just glued to their electronics or screens or things like that. We see people who just never quite know how to sit with those emotions, and learning how to sit with those emotions and pass through them is how we learn to cope with them. So the other thing that we see when we kind of push aside strong emotions in children, especially the undesirable emotions, is that we see the ones that are too strong to be pushed down come out in ways of aggression. Okay, so that's when we see the really big feelings of those anger and that the hitting, the screaming, the crying, those kinds of things, even the lying, the cheating, they're these big emotions. And those are usually because we haven't created a space for them to kind of feel and process those emotions and move through them. What we've done is we've kind of stunted that. And so they have to come out somehow. Those are the young people who go to school and maybe hit kids when stuff happens at school, or, those kinds of things. And so what we want to do as caretakers is we want to make sure that when they're feeling that they walk into a room and they're crying, or they come to us and they need us for something has happened, we want to get down to their level. That eye contact is huge. That's back with the attachment. That's huge. And say, what happened? You seem upset. That sounds really hard. Tell me more about that. Wow, that must have been really scary for you, or really hard for you, or embarrassing, or what else did you feel? What happened next? And that's how we hold the space. We want to really make sure that we don't try to take over the space, because in the sake of efficiency, in the sake of cleaning it up, in the sake of moving on, it's really tempting to say, wait, you just dropped a cookie and it broke. That's not a big deal. Stop crying. Okay. And it's not a big deal, right? To us, we know, because we've had a lifetime of experience, we know that they'll get over that. But in that moment, that is a really big deal to them. And that is a big emotion. And so we want to say, wow, how did that happen? And, how are you feeling about that? And that sounds really hard. We want to make sure there's a space to hold it. We also don't want to jump to the solution. Okay, so they come to us and say, someone broke my toy and they're really upset. Before we jump to the solution focused part, we want to give them that space to really feel and process it. And then once they've kind of released that pressure, then we can move to, okay, so how can I make this right? How can we work together so this doesn't happen again? How can we repair this hurt for you? But holding that space is really important. And I see too often adults, caretakers want to rush that process. You really can't rush it. So something that adults will say to me is, well, what if they never stop crying? What if they never get over it? What if they never, what if this takes hours and hours? And what I've seen, except in the case of really intense trauma, which, there's definitely not enough time to get into today, except in the case of really big things, big traumas, most of the time, if we allow a space for young people to feel, they move through that pretty quickly. They have a boo-boo, they're scared, they cry about it, they want some hugs, they want some comfort, they want to share their experience, their hurt, and then they're like, okay, I'm ready. So if we end up, that's what I mean by working smarter, not harder. If we give them those periods to release those feelings, a lot of time, the majority of the time, they move through it and they get to the other side. The other thing that teaches them is that crucial skill of self-soothing. Okay, so we don't want to take away obstacles. We don't want to remove the negative experiences, those undesirable emotions. We don't want to give them everything they've ever wanted so they never feel anything bad. That's really damaging. And we're actually seeing in this generation of younger people who are growing up, we're seeing that style of permissive parenting is really hurting them, that they get into the real world and have no idea how to cope and how to get through when things don't go their way. So that's why I say to hold the space, let them kind of express that, release that pressure, listen. As adults, just listen and be there and hold that space and hug them and love on them. And then once they've kind of passed through that, then we can start to problem solve. Okay, so really important to hold the space, and that validates their emotions and prevents them from repressing or aggressing. It also teaches them to healthy ways to cope with strife and obstacles, right? So they know when they're older, rather than drinking, smoking, doing drugs, gambling, shopping, or bullying people, fighting people, stealing, lying, cheating, it teaches them to talk to somebody, to reach out to a friend, to journal, to speak to a therapist, to do those things that are healthy, rather than avoiding, repressing, or aggressing. Okay, so that is key. So when we we want to address and allow for fear and sadness and disappointment and those things. We want to support and hold them rather than control and dismiss them. Okay, so we also can see when you have other young people you're working with, they will, if you model this for them, they will actually do this for each other, which is really nice. I've seen it happen in settings where you would not think it was going to happen, where someone starts to almost come undone, and we see a peer of theirs or a sibling or someone else take over and say, oh my gosh, tell me more about that. And that's really what we want. We want to teach them to be the best adults and caretake themselves. The third thing that I want to cover is the need for spontaneous play. So we are in such an overscheduled world. I've never seen anything like it. I work with young people who it takes weeks to schedule a 45-minute therapy appointment because they have activities from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to bed. And the structured activities are important. They are those music lessons and those, the soccer and those kinds of things. That's really important. The school day, the gym, that's important. But we know for child development that need for spontaneity and play is really crucial for developing the right side of the brain, the creativity. It allows for communication development, for problem solving, that we really want to, especially today with like virtual school. I mean, they're so structured and busy that it doesn't allow them the time to really get creative. And as adults, as caretakers, we want to let them take the lead with this. It doesn't matter how ridiculous it sounds to us. Let them be space invaders on planet whatever, okay? Let them create a world where none of it makes sense to us, because it's not about us, right? It's about them problem solving and figuring this out. And how amazing of an experience it is as a young person to have an adult engage with you and let them take the lead with this, right? I mean, it's so big, and that's where self-esteem really stems from. And that's where the risk taking, that the careful risk taking, not irresponsible risk taking, but allowing them to feel their voice and find it and feel important, and like their ideas and their creations are really important to us. So take part in that, and let them lead the way, right? Play along with it in a real way, and get rid of the distractions, the other pieces of it. Okay. So it's really important that without that creative, that spontaneous play, what we see is that they have difficulties with creativity, with problem solving. They can't be flexible. We see these really rigid people growing up. Sometimes it leads to that obsessive compulsive kind of behaviors. And so we want them to really learn how to be creative. And I've watched as the world has become more YouTube focused, more screen focused, and more overstructured focused, I've seen that there's less of this ability to just play, okay, let's do some imaginative things. What do you mean by that? What does that mean? Like, they don't even know how, which is really sad. So we want to encourage that natural, spontaneous play, and just play along. Have the lightsaber, the imaginary lightsaber, and we're going to battle, and really carry that out. It's important. It might not seem important. It's so important. And so really encourage that and be a part of that. The fourth area is developing that sense of autonomy and independence. We have that permissive style of parenting that I was talking about. We kind of overcorrected the authoritarian style of parenting that preceded that. And so we were trying to make little robots in Pleasantville, and we saw, wait, that's not the direction we want to go in. And unfortunately, we went in the other direction and thought everybody gets an award and everyone's the best and everyone makes the team. And this might be I might be very unpopular for this part of it, but I really think it's important not to create an inflated sense of self-esteem. That's not helpful for people at all. If you're not the best at something, that's okay, because you can't be the best at everything. We have to know what it's like to fail. We have to know what it's like to feel fear and work through that and find our courage and our bravery. That's where perseverance comes from. That's where work ethic comes from. So if every time a child feels that a teacher's mean to them or someone says something mean, we immediately remove that obstacle, then they have this sense of the world as being easy peasy lemon squeezy, and the first thing that comes their way that isn't like that, they fall apart. They have no idea. But I'm the best, I'm the smartest, I'm the prettiest, I'm the most popular. That's not how the world works. And so while it can be convenient to kind of, for parenting, sometimes it can be really convenient to remove all of those obstacles and kind of like, it's almost like they grow up in this bubble, right? It can be really convenient to do that because we feel good when they feel good. It also stops them from it's really crucial part of development, which is it's okay to make a mistake and to work through that. It's okay to flounder a little bit. And so that's the other reason why I say, let them feel, let them process, don't just solve it for them. You know, obviously if there's a situation and they've been wronged, we will address it with that other person, but also addressing it with that young person and saying, what could you do? What do you think could be done differently? What do you need to maybe work on so that doesn't happen again? I saw a lot of, when I worked in the schools, parents would come to me and say, my child has no friends. I need you to make them friends. And I was like, oh, okay, I'd be happy to teach them skills. And no, I don't want that. I want you to just find them friends. I mean, I can do that, but what it does is it creates this false sense of security and of the person that isn't actually real, that doesn't teach them anything. That's putting a Band-Aid on a huge wound. Okay, so all it does is it just kind of like glosses over it. And then they get into the world and there's no me to make them friends, right? And so they don't know how to do that. They don't have those skills. So that problem solving happens, those skills happen when they fail, when they fall, okay? And so we want to make sure we don't remove that for them, but we are still there to comfort and to allow them to feel and grow and be part of that process with them. The last area, that I want to talk about in terms of the key ways to support young people is the appropriate boundaries and limit setting. Again, some people think I'm too strict about this kind of thing. What I know about human behavior and development, what we know for a fact is that people, humans, children, all ages, we crave structure. We need to know what the rules are in order to feel safe. And young people are no different. I remember watching a Twilight Zone when I'm dating myself completely, but I remember watching a Twilight Zone in which there was a family and the parents were structured, they were strict, they weren't overbearing, and these kids wanted to do whatever they wanted to do, right? And so they got together and they had this wish. These siblings were like, we wish we had no parents, we wish we had no rules. And of course, Twilight Zone, they wake up and they have no parents and they have no rules. And at first they're so excited, sort of like that Home Alone movie, right, with Macaulay Culkin. At first he eats, chocolate and he's got it all over him and he's running around the house and jumping on the bed and having the best time ever. But eventually that really wears off and something happens, and that's what happened in the Twilight Zone. Someone got hurt and they didn't know what to do and they had no one to help them. And so that's the flip side of it, is that with no rules, there's no structure, there's no accountability, and that's really scary for young people. And so we want to find a way to focus our boundaries and limit settings on the behavior, not just have consequences to have consequences, but to really match the consequences with the behaviors, okay? And to set those limits so they know where the boundary is. They know where right and wrong is. When we remove limits, it creates a sense of entitlement. And we don't want entitled adults. We probably all know someone who is kind of an overgrown child and feels entitled to the rules don't apply to me. It creates a lot of problems, conduct disorders, narcissism, manipulation. It creates a lot of problems, and that usually stems from that style of parenting of there were no rules, there was no one around, and so they kind of made it up as they went. Rules and consequences are not mean at all. They're actually really kind and really necessary to cultivate that safety and security. And so kids know where the boundaries are and they know how to follow rules. How important. I can't imagine getting pulled over for speeding, which obviously that would never happen because I'm perfect in every way. But let's just say I was pulled over. I can't imagine saying, well, I didn't feel like the speed limit was right for me today, so you can't give me a ticket. My mom says that you can't get, like, that's not what we're going for. I'd probably end up in jail. So we want to make sure that we have those rules. The best way that I have found to set rules and structure is ahead of time. If you can do that, we can't always do that because we can't always know what creative ways rules are going to be broken, right? But if there are certain things that we can do, family meetings are wonderful for this, to set up rules for what's our code of behavior for the family? What do you guys feel is fair? What do you think we should all do to work together? And to be part of that as an adult is really important too. So everyone feels like they're helping create those rules and those punishments, those consequences, those boundaries. And so that's what we want to do. We want to have those realistic expectations of reality. It's not mean to say, if you hurt someone, then you have to make that right, because that's how society works. So that is, those rules and those consequences are critical. Those limits are critical, and they're not always going to like them. I remember, when I was doing some research and I was watching a parenting video, this woman said, to be a good parent, you have to be really unpopular sometimes. And that really stuck with me. To be a good caretaker in general, you have to be the mean guy. And that's how they see it. We're not being mean. Mean is just setting rules and punishments just to hurt someone. But what we're doing is we're creating a world that's realistic and that they can grow and function and take risks and fall and really develop that self-awareness in a safe, structured environment. That's what we're all trying to do. And so we start with more rules, and then as they grow and change and we see that they can be responsible, we loosen up on those. Okay, so we don't just give them a smartphone and say, have at it, right? We don't just graduate from high school and someone says, you're the CEO of the world, have at it, right? We work our way up. So let them show you that they can be responsible. Let them show you that they understand the boundaries and can do it, and then loosen up as we go. Okay, I'm really big on, when my young people will say, tell my mom that I need a smartphone, tell my mom I need TikTok, I say, you don't want me to talk to your parents about social media, because if it were up to me, none of us would have it, which is sad because we wouldn't be doing this right now. But for young people, no, not at all. And so we really want to set boundaries with things like that. And it teaches people and children, young people, to have self boundaries and that self-awareness to kind of create structure in their own lives. So for you guys, for the caretakers themselves, it's really important for us to model what we want to see back. Okay, so if we want to grow children to be responsible and respectful and emotionally stable, how can we do that if we aren't ourselves, right? So if we're yelling, if we're stressed all the time, if we're too busy, if, those things, then how can we get angry or disappointed or upset with a young person who literally mirrors back exactly what we've done? Okay, so it's really important for us, especially now, to take those moments. They don't have to be hours. Most of us don't have a full hour to just do a meditation and breathing exercise, okay? We can take 10 seconds to just, how am I doing? Am I okay? Let's bring it down. Okay, so really to make sure that we are monitoring our own behavior and being the model that we want them to mirror back. Okay, so if we're yelling, that if anger breeds anger, but love breeds love. And so if we are mindful about the way we carry ourselves, the way we talk about people, the way we engage with our partners, with our friends, with our family members, we want to pretend almost that we are always on a Zoom, that we're always being watched in a way, because we are. I know that all of you know young people are sponges. They are paying attention to everything. Okay, sitting in the backseat of a car growing up, and I can hear my parents saying some not nice things about my relatives, and I'm soaking that up. And so what that's doing is it's allowing me to grow and think that that's normal. It's normal to badmouth people. It's normal to gossip. It's normal to judge people and criticize. And then that also breeds that kind of like, okay, so what are they saying about me when I'm not in the room, right? So we want to be a model for young people at all times. And by the way, it's okay to screw up. That's a model too. It's so important for us to make a mistake and own it. If we're expecting young people to stand up when we say, who did this? If we're expecting them to go, me, then we also have to say, me, how can I make this right? I'm really sorry. When I worked with some really extreme trauma situations, some young people, I'll never forget, making some mistakes and apologizing. And I mean, I didn't think it would work, but I knew I did something wrong, and my mom taught me to apologize. So that's what I did, apologizing to this young person. I'm so sorry. I said I would do something and I ran out of time, and that's not okay. And you're important to me, and I want to make this right. And I couldn't believe the shift in, I hate you, I'm never talking to you again, you're a terrible person, to them kind of comforting me and saying, that's okay, you made a mistake. We all make mistakes, and I can see you're hurting, and that's okay, and so that's what we want to model for them too. And for us right now, we're all tapped out, and we're all tired and hungry and exhausted and just at our wits' end. Please don't forget to take care of yourself. That's also something that young people really need to see. They need to see that it's okay to step back and take a break, that it's okay to be tired and to need to take a rest, that it's okay to have quiet time, that we really want to cultivate that in young people too, and in ourselves. You guys are like the beautiful star on the top of the Christmas tree, right? And everything kind of trickles down from there. So if your light is dim, if your light is broken, if you're falling to the side, then that is like a domino effect on the entire family, on everyone that you work with. And so sometimes it's faking it. I know sometimes I have to fake it. I'm exhausted and I'm done, and I've done 9 hours of Zoom and I just can't. And we don't have that option as caretakers. We have to take a deep breath, do what you can to move through it, and re-engage. Okay, so make sure you're checking yourself, make sure you're taking walks, make sure, even if it's 10 seconds, for you to just breathe at a stoplight and say, I'm okay, I've got this, I can get through this, or I'm not okay. What do I need to do to get myself back on track? And do it. Sleep, food, appropriate food, because I know a lot of us are just stress eating right now. That we, talk to people, connect, engage in whatever ways that you can fit into those little pockets of time. Okay, so we want to be efficient with that. So yeah, I think those were the 5 areas, and I want you guys to take care of yourselves, and I want you to make everything work for you. And hopefully you found something helpful that I said today. I'm sure I'm not recreating the wheel, that a lot of these things are things that you already know, but I think we can all use a reminder sometimes of, oh yeah, that's right. I need to stay grounded. I need to model that. I need to hold the space. I need to reconnect and put my devices down and, you know, get rid of those distractions and really re-engage with my priorities, which is usually not catching up on a series. A priority is rarely those kinds of things. Priorities, if we think about it, are the people we love and our well-being and the things that are really important and crucial to us. The priorities are love, right? It's not necessarily accomplishments or a certain amount of money in a bank account or how busy I was today. Okay, so it's not a competition. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day. I think we're gonna open it up for questions if there are any. And yeah, I'd love to hear from you guys if you try some things. Look at that little one right there, Lucy's little one, so cute. And just, yeah, let me know what you think and what works for you, and we'll kind of go from there.
Thanks, Lauren.
You're welcome.
Friends, so do you have any questions? If you don't feel comfortable asking, you can type it in the chat box. What questions do you have for Lauren?
Okay, let's see.
Nisha.
Yes.
Yes.
School social worker. Oh my gosh. I could only do that for 13 years. God bless you. That's a really tough job.
Okay, so question from Melissa. How can we support our parents and young people as church leaders in a virtual world?
That's a great question. And I think that, you know, the virtual world, I don't know. It depends on what format you're kind of working with, but I think it's really important to kind of develop those, if we can. I know this isn't always possible, but to have an individual connection with people in particular, and just really trying to kind of cultivate that you're important to me, and to listen. I think as adults, we like to hear the sound of our own voice or something. I don't know. I know that's not for everyone, but you know, listen more, hold the space, and ask questions. I feel like as adults, we want to get in there and we want to fix it. Oh, I know what you need. You know, think about as an adult how unhelpful that sometimes is, when you just want to feel something and you just want to feel that emotion, to have someone be like, okay, I know how to fix this. I went through that once. Let me tell you what to do. You know, and so I think it's more about being supportive in a way that is, I'm here and I'm holding the space, and how can I help you? Then this is what you need to do, and let me tell you what's best for you. And so create a space where it's safe to ask questions, create a space where it's safe to just be real and feel and connect as a person on that level, if that answers the question a little bit, rather than trying to just speak to everyone at once, which is important too, but to have those moments where you can connect and say, you're important to me. What do you need? What can I be for you?
Yeah, that's great. And Leanne Hadley has a resource called Listening Stones that you can online. And it gives kids an opportunity to pick a stone that have different, just random images on it that they can use to help describe their emotions. So if you to have a space online even for kids to experience and be able to hold space for big emotions, I can get some more information about that out to you. Next,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, what do you do when we notice tics, shoulder shrugging, certain noises, itching, ringing?
Okay. So tics, for the most part, what we've seen, what the research has shown, is that that's a buildup of really strong either anxiety. Those are they're usually driven from anxiety in most of the situations. There might be some neurological things, but I'm kind of moving past that today, and focusing on more of the emotional behavioral piece. So what we want to do with that is when we notice tics, that's, so if you think of the, the day's experience as a balloon, every time something uncomfortable, undesirable happens, it kind of blows up the balloon a little bit. And what we want to do, the tics happen when we don't create a space where they can release some of that pressure, and they end up spilling over in physical ways. So that's when I was talking about the repression of emotions. It has to go somewhere. Okay. So it doesn't go away. It ends up popping up. So what we want to do when we see those tics, when we see those, the shoulder shrugs, I see the face things a lot, the neck movements, even the vocal tics, is we want to incorporate calming, grounding, breathing techniques throughout the day. We don't want to wait until they are already having tics to say, okay, now is the time for you to breathe. It's sort of like waiting until you have a panic attack to teach yourself how to breathe. You're not going to be able to do that. Okay, so what we want to do, or if you can, that's amazing. Let me know, you're superhuman. So what we want to do is create those opportunities throughout the day to release some of that pressure. Exercise is great. Deep breathing techniques, amazing. Relaxation, like tense release, those things are wonderful. We want to create a space, sometimes like the pressure, kind of constriction of, depending on your role. Obviously, if you're in the schools, you might not be able to like touch and do those things. But if you're at home with people or in a setting where it's appropriate and it's helpful, sometimes the weighted blankets really help. I recommend, especially for older teens, if you're sitting in front of a screen, younger kids, this is great. Weighted vests. Now we have those weighted blankets. They're really popular. You can find them everywhere. Fidgets are really good because those tics are energy that's been stored up that needs to kind of be released. And so when we bring it down, those tics tend to kind of resolve themselves. The other thing we want to do is make sure we're not calling them out. We're not, obviously, I'm hoping everyone knows that we're not teasing them, and that we're watching for maybe their peers and their siblings, making sure they're not teasing them and shaming them either. The bigger we make it, the bigger and more shameful it becomes and stressful for the person, which just inflates the balloon further. Okay, so we want to make sure throughout the day is huge, huge, huge. You don't want to wait until the end of the day, which is when a lot of parents and people suffering from tics will say are the worst, because they've kind of held it together all day. We want to relieve the pressure as we go. And so all those calming techniques, mindfulness techniques, those are really helpful.
Cool. Another question. Thanks. Ideas for serving families who have limited technical knowledge or capacity and struggle with keeping their kids engaged. Okay. So what we want to do with that is this is the work smarter, not harder kind of thing. I actually feel, the technology piece is tough because I know that depending on what community you're in, and I haven't been in the schools in several years, so I don't know what the programs are now, but I know that there are outreach programs and things, resources to get some of that technology to families who don't have it, to get those internet connections and things like that. I have heard about my old school social work colleagues kind of talking about being able to deliver those to families. I would always encourage them. One of the barriers to delivering some of these resources is pride. And so it's very difficult for some families to ask for help and to say that they have a need. And so to, really make sure that we don't shame and kind of close that off, but to encourage that. But, aside from that is to get creative with the use of limited technology. I feel like technology can sometimes create more of a barrier in learning and connecting. And so that's where these family meetings, these family activities, let's create a space where everyone is kind of in, you have workspaces in particular, and you can kind of share those resources.
teach them how to be resourceful so that they don't think they need this to do every assignment. They don't need this. And it actually kind of hampers them sometimes. Remember, we had to go to the library and look up a card catalog, and we had to wait for the book to come in. And so in those times where we were waiting, those are the times for that spontaneous play, for that creativity. Where else could you find this information? What else could we use to learn this skill and teach these kinds of things? And so that's where, you know, we can get creative with those limited resources. But that's a lot of front loading. So you have to kind of set behavior expectations ahead of time, and you have to let them know that they may have to wait, and that's okay, and how to appropriately wait their turn, and what they can do. Structure that unstructured time a little bit. What can you do when you're waiting for me to come over and help you? What can you do when you don't have it's not your turn for the tablet? Can you read? Can you be writing? Can you be working on something else? Can you find some math manipulatives? Can you be cleaning your area? Can you be fixing a snack? You know, to really like use those rather than just having them sit and wait. You know, using those times really, I mean, and that teaches time management, right? Which is a skill we all need. And so to kind of get creative with that, if you aren't able to have the resources so everyone can have their tablet. I actually prefer the idea of people having to share resources, because isn't that kind of a life skill that we all need sometimes, you know? And so the carpooling, and that you can't always have your own bubble of a perfect situation, you know, to be flexible. If that makes sense, hopefully.
Thanks, Lauren. Any other questions? Kate shared something in the chat box about when they start their time together, they do 10 to 15 minutes of updates to share and care, so that kids can what they've done, and makes them feel extra important. Just to be engaged, and if they're online, to do like a drawing on the shared whiteboard. So those are some
absolutely
giving kids an opportunity to connect and share what's going on in their world.
Yeah, and there's a lot more games and resources as we, you know, continue this pandemic, the stay at home, the virtual school. There's more and more resources every day. I love technology and I hate it at the same time. I feel like social media is the best and kind of the worst thing ever. So I'm biased, and I'm like very vocal about my bias against technology. I think it's really helped people with some social anxiety and some limitations in terms of transportation and those kinds of things. It has been a helpful vehicle, but I think it's also really contributed to the breakdown of connection and the inability to be patient in a lot of young people. Holy cow. They just can't wait. They can't wait for anything right now. You know, I'm like, just, you know, so I think that sometimes not having access to those resources can end up being something that's helpful, a strength later on in life.
Yeah, for sure. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you, Lauren,
Thank you
for being with us. I am going to send out an email to all of you who have participated within the next few days with a link to the video. And I think this was really helpful. So I might put together two videos, one that has the Q&A and one that just has what Lauren has talked about that you may want to share with your families. Because I think that could be really helpful for families, parents who may be at home struggling with, you know, how do I do this? Some of the questions that Lauren asked earlier, I was taking copious notes because that will be helpful with my kiddos also. So just know that this webinar was funded by Ministry Shares, paid by Churches of the Michigan Conference. So thank you for that. And thank you for coming, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks so much, everyone. It was great to see you today. I appreciate you taking the time. It's very little time. So thank you. I hope it was helpful.
Yeah, thank you.